Do you think it's wrong for an American mother of 5 and a wife to divorce her husband just so her monthly government benefits double? This is just one example Ronald Reagan uses in his speech, A Time for Choosing. Today I'm going to give a short speech critiquing Ronald Reagan. I'm going to describe a little bit of the speech itself. I'm going to give you some of the speaking techniques he used. I'm going to discuss the emotions he used throughout the speech. And I'm also going to discuss the impact it had on the audience and myself. And last but not least, I'm going to talk a little bit about the speaking techniques that I would like to adopt for Ronald Reagan's speech. First off, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the speech, A Time for Choosing. It was a speech that Ronald Reagan wrote in the 60s for Barry Goldwater's campaign. The main purpose of the speech was to discuss how the government needs to take a step back and to reduce the American deficit, and also just to take a step back from the Americans' lives and not control them so much. This hit home with so many Americans because money is a very sensitive issue, and Americans do not want to live in a high deficit. It was also very effective with the audience that I will later talk about. The second point I wanted to get into was Ronald Reagan's speaking techniques. He started out with a great attention getter. He put down cold hard facts right away. He said that the government spends $17 million more a day than it takes in. He also was very good at keeping people interested with the stories he told. Like the story I told in the beginning about the woman who had the children who divorced her husband for extra benefits. He also went personally into it and discussed Barry Goldwater himself and how he used to fly back from Arizona to California just to give soldiers a ride home in his personal airplane for Christmas time. The speech was very well organized. Ronald Reagan is a great writer. He started out strong with the cold hard facts and went into the stories to get really personal. He had it lined up very well and concluded it very well at the end. My favorite part about Ronald Reagan's speaking techniques is his confidence. Ronald Reagan has extremely high confidence, and according to author Michael Lewis, Reagan is actually considered the great communicator because of his elegant alignment of words, and the feelings just naturally come to him. The next point I wanted to get into was the emotions that Ronald Reagan uses. Reagan, throughout the entire speech, had a very positive, very strong and serious emotions. And according to Gary Gernard, he was a Boston-based political consultant, he stated that in a Campaigns and Election magazine that every politician needs to come off authoritative, empathetic, and more concerned with the voters' needs than their own. And Reagan did a very, very good job with this. He conveyed very strongly with his facial emotions and the tone of his voice on how he was very concerned about this and that the American population should trust Barry Goldwater in actually achieving this, and he did a very great job with this. The fourth point I wanted to touch on was the impact that it had on the audience and myself. At the end of the speech, it showed the audience, and they were cheering and just very, very excited about this speech, that you could really tell that Ronald Reagan hit home with them, and that these American citizens were indeed looking for change. I personally thought Ronald Reagan did a very good job, and if I were an audience, he would have mostly had my vote for Barry Goldwater. He did a very great job with the audience and definitely hitting home at exactly what the audience wanted to hear. The last point I want to touch on is the techniques that I would use in my further speeches. I really liked Ronald Reagan and his stories, and I think that in my further speeches, I will definitely take the idea of sharing stories, whether it be personal stories or just stories in general, to keep the audience interested. I would also like to gain the confidence that Ronald Reagan has when he speaks. Confidence is very strong, and I believe that anyone with that form of confidence can, without a doubt, give an amazing speech. I would also like to have the same emotions that Ronald Reagan has. He had a very serious set of emotions, and they were very touching on the audience, and you can definitely tell that he believed in what he was talking about. Well, today in my speech, I touched on Ronald Reagan's speech, and I just wanted to touch back on a couple things that I talked about. I explained a little bit about the speech and the contents of the speech. I went into his speaking techniques, and I also talked about the impact on the audience and myself and the techniques that I would use. I think that Ronald Reagan was an amazing person, and he definitely did a great job speaking.